Imagine a person, someone who doesn't leave the house for days, who remains silent in a group of friends, staying anchored in their own world. To a casual observer, they might look a bit uncomfortable or out of place in a crowd. But when they are alone, they are the most entertaining, vibrant person in the world. The kind of person you could have a deep conversation with for hours on end. Who is this person? Is it you? Is it your closest friend? You've probably heard people like this, or perhaps yourself, frequently labeled as asocial, shy, or too withdrawn. And let's be honest, you've likely found yourself acting a certain way in public just to avoid hearing those labels, only to rush home as soon as the door closes to finally be alone with yourself. If that sounds like you, then you are one of us. Welcome. Come on, let's share a hug. Just kidding, no hugging. But let's take a moment to explain ourselves to the rest of the world. But first, we need to clear a few things up. I used the word asocial in the title and thumbnail of this video because that is the term society often uses to misidentify these people. In reality, that label is completely incorrect. Terms like a person who prefers solitude or an introvert are far more accurate. Then, there is the term antisocial, which is also frequently misused. Antisociality is actually a serious personality disorder. People with this condition disregard the rights of others, exhibit aggression, and engage in actions that lead to arrest. They struggle with lying, deceiving others, impulsivity, an inability to plan for the future, and extreme irritability. But that is a heavy topic for another video. Here we are talking about introversion, which is simply the exact opposite of extraversion. Contrary to popular belief, introverts are not asocial. On the contrary, they actually enjoy being around people, spending time with others, and engaging in meaningful conversations. Usually, they have no problem with social interaction at all. However, these individuals don't mind being alone. In fact, they prefer it. Their most creative, peaceful, and happiest moments are the times they spend by themselves. They can stay home alone for hours or even days without getting bored for a single second. I want to address a common misunderstanding here before we go any further. Most people pester these individuals, asking things like, "How can you possibly not be bored all by yourself?" Or, "Isn't just sitting there doing nothing incredibly dull?" Well, it's not like that at all. For an introvert, the time spent in solitude is their most productive time. They formulate their most important plans and make their most significant life decisions during these quiet moments. And this isn't just a personality quirk, it's biological coding. Just as extroverts might feel more energized and productive in large groups, introverts thrive and find their strength in solitude. Audrey Hepburn, one of the most famous introverts in history, once famously said, "I'm an introvert. I love being by myself. I love being outdoors. I love taking a long walk with my dogs and looking at the trees, flowers, and the sky." She even noted that if she were left alone from Saturday night until Monday morning, she would be perfectly happy. First of all, the biggest misunderstanding comes from how modern society misinterprets science. In psychology, there is a well-known concept called the Big Five personality traits. The problem isn't the science itself, it's the lens through which the modern world reads it. In this classification, introversion is often measured simply as having low extraversion. And unfortunately, an aggressive, loud society looks at that word, low, and immediately equates it with a deficiency. They see introverts as incomplete extroverts, as if they are just poor souls who somehow failed to be loud enough. What a remarkably arrogant way to look at the vast, quiet depths of the human mind. We also must realize that the modern world is designed almost exclusively for extroverts. No matter where you go, the workplace, the school system, even the streets, it's everywhere. Team spirit, group work, collective activities, environments where working with the team is presented as a mandatory virtue. People look at you with suspicion if you dare to say, "I'd rather work on my own." They look at that quiet student sitting in the corner of the classroom who is actually quite content in their own mind, as if they are a puzzle that needs to be fixed. Usually, those who don't join the loud group are assumed to have something fundamentally wrong with them. And it doesn't stop at just thinking. People feel the need to intervene. Teachers call parents to the school. Man saying things like, "Your son is incredibly smart. He gets top grades in every class, but he doesn't participate in group work. He doesn't join the team." Or consider a corporate environment. A manager might say, "Thanks to our colleague Amit, our company saved millions this year. He's doing an extraordinary job, but he lacks leadership qualities. If only he would show us all of his talents by being more vocal." There is a massive community of people living under the weight of these buts, slowly accepting that there is something wrong with them. Yet, according to research, roughly 1/3 of the entire world's population is introverted. Don't go anywhere, we are just getting started. See you in the next part. There is a persistent misconception that there is a link between high intelligence and extraversion. That is not the case at all. And to be clear, the reverse isn't true either. We aren't suggesting that introverts are inherently smarter than extroverts. There is simply no direct correlation. Introverts just express their talents and process their thoughts in fundamentally different ways. However, we can discuss one distinct advantage that introverts possess. These individuals can often absorb and process information much more deeply in any given situation. They can analyze data better in quiet environments, and because they don't seek external applause or instant validation, they are often able to reach more logical, long-term solutions and decisions. This is why it's actually highly probable for them to be far more effective leaders than those who are traditionally thought to have leadership qualities, just because they talk the loudest. We can also say that introverts don't really require constant emotional stimulants. They have very little interest in the pursuit of happiness that is so aggressively glorified in the modern world. Flashy lifestyles, fame, the desire to be loved by absolutely everyone, these aren't things they find fulfilling. On the contrary, the empty pursuit of happiness is actually quite exhausting and disturbing to them. For an introvert, there is a reality far more important than fleeting happiness: the search for meaning. But as I mentioned, when these people are constantly exposed to the expectations of the modern world, they begin to feel excluded and inadequate. This often leads to deep-seated self-confidence issues. Because they aren't flashy by nature, they start to blame themselves for not fitting in. They become the misfits of a society that doesn't know how to listen. I mentioned shyness earlier. Although they might look identical from a distance, they should never be confused. Bernardo Carducci defines shyness like this: a shy person actually wants to socialize. They desire it deeply, but they find themselves unable to do it due to anxiety. And in the end, they feel a sense of failure. An introvert, however, chooses solitude because that is where they recharge. In a social gathering, the introvert has simply decided that they've had enough social stimulation for the day. Furthermore, introverts don't have a goal of hiding from people. They can be perfectly comfortable in society. But if you want to recognize an introverted character, look for the person who is listening intently in a crowd. When they do speak, they are usually the ones engaged in a deep, one-on-one discussion with a single person. They prefer a calm, thoughtful debate. They prefer to think before they utter a single word. This is why, while speaking in front of a large group isn't impossible for an introvert, it feels incredibly exhausting and, quite often, a bit meaningless. To them, there is no real exchange of soul in those types of performative speeches. Looking at the concept of solitude, we must admit this: whether you are an extrovert or an introvert, every human needs a certain amount of solitude to remain sane. The cultural perception that solitude is inherently negative needs to be dismantled once and for all. Every human being has the right to want to be alone, and we must respect that boundary. Moreover, we must remember that many of humanity's most important discoveries, greatest paintings, timeless musical works, and deepest philosophies were born out of the womb of solitude. Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, is a perfect study in introversion. Even though we didn't see him on the grand stages as much, his technical and creative contribution was perhaps even more foundational than that of Steve Jobs himself. When I say we live in a world designed for extroverts, this is exactly what I mean. When you look at two people doing the same job, we tend to applaud the one who talks the loudest. We prefer people seen in motion over people who are thinking. We have become a culture that measures value by how loud someone's voice is, rather than the quality of the work they produce. And this leads to the destructive cycle I've been talking about from the start. It leads to the exhausting question introverts constantly ask themselves, why do I even bother? This question is so critical because it points to a very serious systemic failure, the erosion of meritocracy. In this loud-mouthed mindset, opportunities aren't actually given to the most deserving or the most capable. And here, we can observe a global, historical, cultural shift. When we compare the past to the present, we often hear people say, people used to be more honest, more understanding, and more peaceful. The reason for this nostalgia is actually quite logical. Before the age of social media, the most valuable currency was character. But with the turn of the 21st century, we have witnessed a violent shift. I am truly sorry to say it, but we are living in an era where fools have become the most famous. Shouting is the only way to get attention. The gravity of this situation can be seen in our children. In a recent study, the vast majority of children in the Western world said their dream was to be a YouTuber. They didn't say doctors or engineers. The dream of actually changing the world is fading. Children only dream of being seen. This includes introverted children as well. Children who would naturally enjoy solitude and deep thinking now feel pressured to suppress those traits. They try to adopt a persona that is unnatural for them. If you aren't shouting, you are treated as a deficient citizen of this modern era. But once we finally understand that this quiet, calm child is not an abnormal person who needs to be fixed, we will begin to solve the deepest problems of our society. The same applies to you and to all of us. Introversion is not a syndrome that needs to be cured. If you prefer to spend your precious free time alone, there is nothing more natural or healthy than that. Albert Einstein put it beautifully. Be a person who loves solitude. It gives you the time to be curious and to seek the truth. Have a great curiosity. Make your life worth living. In other words, when you stop fighting your nature and instead embrace it, when you are finally happy just being yourself, you gain the power to create miracles. Share your results of the personality test in the comments. Let's see the diversity of minds we have here. Before I finish, thank you for your support with subtitle translations. Thank you for choosing to spend your time here with me. It's good to have you. Best regards.